Hi again! This is my second video that I'm making during our isolation time for coronavirus. This time I'm going to try and make my own muslins. I think this is going to be an easy one. Buy the fabric, press and sew the seams, and that should be it. But I'm using a tutorial from YouTube. I will link it below and I'll take you on the journey with me as well. So, muslins, mainly used for babies, for swaddling and for mopping up dribble and sick and things like that, covering ourselves when we're breastfeeding or if baby's in the buggy. The material actually used for muslins isn't called muslin, it's called gauze double gauze. So I've gone and bought some material from a shop. One has this lovely little duck pattern on it, you can see. Another one, which I'll open a bit wider because it's got a bigger pattern, has this kind of like cactus succulent pattern on it that's repeated as well. So I have these two, and then I've also got some fabric that my mum gave me, which is just plain white, has a lovely kind of crinkly effect to it. It's been used in various things, so I'm just going to cut this up and use this just for kind of mopping up, etc. If the muslins are used for swaddling, they need to be slightly bigger, so I think they recommend about 120 centimetres by 120. And the smaller ones that are used for kind of mopping up and bits like that are usually about 60 centimetres by 60. So my plan is to do one big one with this lovely pattern one so we can swaddle with this one, two smaller ones with the duck, and possibly some even smaller ones with this because I don't think it's going to do 60 by 60, but let's see how we get on. So it's a few days later and I finally finished making my muslins. It took a lot longer than I anticipated, mainly because of the pressing. and kept kind of coming undone, and I needed to pin it, and I had some issues with my sewing machine as well. I'm not a sewing machine pro, quite the beginner. I could probably count on 2 hands the amount of times that I've done sewing with a sewing machine. So I'm going to show you what I've done now, and then I'm going to point out some of the things I learnt and then rate how hard I think this craft was. Starting with the smallest muslins, here we go. These are more known as probably burp cloths, not very big for kind of, you know, wrapping or covering your shoulder too much, but they're available to, you know, mop up whatever you need on the go. I started with white thread. I'll show you a bit closer. So you can't really see, and actually it looks really neat. And I think that looked great actually. And then I decided later on that I wanted to experiment with different colours because the materials are white, so I thought just to, you know, add a bit of a pop that I would kind of use some different thread. Now this is one of my tips I talk about later, but here for example is a darker yellow colour, and you can see where it's not straight. And that, as I said, I'm not a pro on a sewing machine. You can see every single mistake with this, so maybe a lighter colour if you're feeling like you're not, you know, super experienced. But what I later decided to do, because I still wanted to persevere with different colours, is I chose a different stitch. And I actually chose, I don't know if you can see, this one. And I felt that even though I wasn't perfectly straight all the time as well with this one, and because it was a more interesting stitch, it doesn't matter as much, and it created quite a nice boxed in effect for that one. And I've done that in a few different colours, so I'm not very good at showing this. So there's like a light pink one, mustardy yellow one. So yes, I preferred actually the more interesting stitch or the light colour that you can't see for that one. And then we move on to our lovely duck material, and for this one I decided to do a yellow stitching around the outside, and again you can see it's not perfect. Can you see the stitching there, for example, where I haven't kept absolutely straight? But from afar, because it's patterned as well, you're not going to see every single mistake that you made, but you could maybe try the different stitch and that might look quite good as well, or stick to white if you want it to look more hidden. And then my favourite one, which was our big swaddle cloth, I decided to stick with white because I wanted it to look really nice finish, and I didn't want to lose, you know, if I'd gone wrong. And as you can see, you can't really see any mistakes on that. And yeah, it came out really well, and I'm really pleased with that one. So that's the different muslins that I made. I'm just going to go through some of the points that I learned or observations that I found making them, and then I will rate it for you. Okay, so my observation number 1, or my kind of thing that I learned, is make sure you have some experience with a sewing machine. The reason I say this is because actually the reason it took me quite a few days to finish this was because I was inexperienced with a sewing machine. I kept coming up with issues with the thread knotting up or it not looping properly, and actually most of my time was spent trying to figure that out and calling my mum, and yeah, so I would say make sure that you've got some experience with a sewing machine, or alternatively, if you don't have any experience, this can be done sewing by hand. Obviously it would take longer, but yes, you can just do a running stitch along the edge, and that would definitely work as well. The second thing I learnt was about the pressing. Now, in the video tutorial, which I've linked below, she does the double fold and presses with an iron going all the way along. Now, I tried this and I actually found it really difficult, and I got really frustrated because it kept unravelling, and I found it hard while I was trying to press to kind of fold the next bit, etc. So what I would recommend, I've got my material to show you, is to do your first fold and press all over that with an iron first, before then doing your second fold and pressing again. And then I would also add that I pinned it a little bit, just to keep the folds in place, because I found that if I just left it, they came unravelled, and when it came to sewing I had to constantly fiddle with it. So that's my tip about pressing. It does take a while, and I found that it was actually the most monotonous part of doing this, mainly because I had quite a lot of small ones that I was doing. So if you were planning to do just a couple of swaddle ones, it wouldn't be as monotonous, obviously. But yeah, so fold, press, pin, and then that should be really easy for you. My observation number 3, we talked about it a little bit a moment ago. It's about thread and choosing the correct colour. If you are not confident at doing really straight, perfect stitches, stick to white or stick to the colour that you're using so it can be hidden as much as possible. Or if you're planning on doing another colour but you're also not comfortable with confident with stitches, etc., choose an interesting stitch. Choose something that is going to make more of a statement rather than just one stitch that is meant to be as straight as possible, because my wiggly lines were very obvious. Okay, observation number 4 was about corners. Now, I found the corners were rubbish. I couldn't get them into my sewing machine, I couldn't get them past, and my needle kept getting stuck and my thread kept getting caught. So my observation for this part is to go along the main part using your foot pedal, and then when you get close to the corner, take your foot off and use the wheel. Now the slower stitches means that you have more control of what is happening, and you're able to use the foot to lift and move the material by hand, where actually it would get stuck in the foot of the sewing machine. So that is my last observation. Corners suck, but use the hand wheel and you'll get past it. And that's it. That's my video on giving it a go, making my own muslins. I really hope you enjoyed watching it, and I hope if you give it a go that you let me know how you get on. I would rate this craft easy to medium, depending on your skill on a sewing machine. So if you are skilled at using a sewing machine, you're quite experienced, I reckon you would find this super easy. If you've never used a sewing machine, I would either recommend that you just give it a go, but it might be a bit harder because you're trying to figure out the sewing machine, or I would recommend hand stitching it. But yeah, I would rate this craft easy to medium.